A captain saw a ship that had sunk for 200 years. A few hours later, the first sailor to discover the ship fell from the mast and unfortunately died on the spot. This is not a horror movie script. This is in the Royal Navy's logbook, with signatures, dates, and official number. And this ship has been sunk since 1650, has repeatedly appeared in the same sea area for over 300 years. Over 60 people on the beach in broad daylight watching it float across the sea. The rotting ship and transparent crew. The moment someone pressed the shutter, the whole ship evaporated as if it never existed. Scientists said it was a mirage, but it can't explain why for 300 years every witness described the details exactly the same. The story begins in the Netherlands in 1650. At that time, the Dutch East India Company controlled the global gold trade routes. The voyage to and from the East Indies could make people rich, but it had to pass through the Cape of Good Hope. Here, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean meet. During the storm season, waves were up to 12 meters and winds over 120 kilometers per hour. Dozens of ships of the company sank here every year, and thousands of sailors died at sea. Captain Hendrik Vanderdecken was one of them. Historical records show that he did exist. His family's downfall made him obsessed with wealth. At 16, he joined the East India Company. At 25, he was in charge of the ship. He was valued by the company for his fast sailing, but was called reckless by his peers and was called paranoid by the crew. In 1680, Vanderdecken was fully loaded, sailed from Amsterdam to Batavia. When he reached Cape of Good Hope, a storm was coming. The first mate advised him to delay the voyage, and other ships also anchored. But he was unwilling to bear the loss of delay. He insisted on setting off. On April 4th, a storm hit the Atlantic Ocean. The ship was hit by strong winds and waves. The locks were damaged and seawater flooded in. The crew begged to return. Vanderdecken pulled out a gun to threaten and roared that even if it was the end of the world, even if he was blocked by gods, he would still pass Cape of Good Hope. He tied himself to the rudder and rushed into the waves. The carpenter heard him curse God and defy the world, and then the ship disappeared in the storm. Witnesses on the shore saw the lights go out. No wreckage or survivors were found after that. 147 crew members were missing. The company listed them as all deceased. But the story didn't end. 3 months later, another Dutch merchant ship found a ship sailing against the wind at Cape of Good Hope. They realized it was Vanderdecken's ship after getting close. The ship was old, the sails were rotten but could still catch the wind. The hull was covered with cracks from reef impacts. The captain in front of the rudder was hideous and full of madness. The crew signaled to no avail. The ghost ship passed through their bow, bringing a biting chill and disappearing in the fog. 2 weeks later, another ship witnessed the same ghost ship, and this ship suddenly sank on the windless sea 3 days later. Half of the crew died. The news spread in the shipping industry. More and more captains claimed that they saw the ghost ship before a storm or disaster at Cape of Good Hope. The legend of the Flying Dutchman was born. It made sailors terrified. By the early 20th century, the legend evolved into a nautical taboo. Never respond to a ghost ship, send signals, or accept anything from the crew. Because it was said that it would send a boat to deliver letters. The recipients were people who had died decades ago, and the handwriting is unrecognizable. Those who receive the letter will suffer bad luck. The ship sank. The person would be forced to join the phantom. The crew would be doomed to float on the sea forever. The only way out is to leave quickly. The most famous sighting is related to the British royal family. In July 1795, the British Royal Navy's HMS Bacant was training at Cape of Good Hope. The future King George V followed as a cadet. At 4 a.m. on July 11th, the officer on duty found a ship glowing with red phosphorescence approaching at high speed on a windless sea. When it got closer, they saw it was a Dutch ancient ship. There were vague figures moving silently on the deck. Prince George and the captain witnessed this scene together. The ghost ship disappeared after passing the bow. This experience was recorded in the official Royal Navy logbook, signed by several officers and the prince. A few hours later, the sailor who first discovered the ghost ship fell from the lock and died. The crew believed it was caused by the ghost ship. Prince George also wrote in his diary they were related. This experience haunted him for the rest of his life. Throughout the 19th century, sightings continued to occur. In 1823, a British captain saw a Dutch ship, but no smoke. It disappeared after parallel sailing for 10 minutes. In 1835, a whaling team saw a ghost ship and disappeared after hitting the cliff, without any wreckage. In 1881, 11 sailors of the British Royal Navy simultaneously witnessed the Flying Dutchman. It sailed at full sail and high speed and disappeared in a flash. The testimonies were highly consistent, and these sailors were well-trained professionals who made a living from accurate observation. The South African sighting in 1939 is the most witnesses in the legend and the most credible one. On a sunny afternoon in March, more than 60 people on Glencairn Beach in southern Cape Town suddenly saw an old square sail ship from the 17th century gliding on the sea 400 yards away. They could clearly see the rotting planks of the ship, broken locks, and transparent figures on the deck.
The whole ship moved without a sound, no waves hitting, no creaking of wooden planks or sails shaking. Professional photographer J.K.L. aimed the camera. The moment he pressed the shutter, the ship evaporated like dust and completely disappeared within 30 seconds. Local newspaper reporters interviewed witnesses, and their descriptions were highly consistent, and the maritime experts confirmed that there were no ships matching the description, or any ancient buildings, or ship filming. There is no reasonable scientific explanation. For 300 years, scientists and skeptics have proposed various explanations for the sightings. The most mainstream is the cold current of Sunshine City and Cape of Good Hope, and warm air form an inversion layer. Light refraction causing distant objects to appear to float and deform. But the imaging distance of this phenomenon is far, which can't explain how witnesses can see the details of crew. There is also the bioluminescence theory, which claims that the light of plankton outlines the wreck. But this light is diffuse and cannot form the solid outline of the sails, and can't explain daytime sightings. Maritime historians have proposed that there are over 3,000 shipwrecks near Cape of Good Hope. Special currents may cause the ship to briefly surface and then sink. This can explain the ancient and sudden disappearance of ships, but it also means that what the witnesses saw are underwater graves of centuries-old sailors. What we can be sure of is that the legend of the Flying Dutchman is not entertainment, but a warning made by real tragedy. Between 1600 and 1800, the Dutch East India Company, over 400 ships sank off the Cape of Good Hope, an average of 2 ships per year. More than 60,000 sailors drowned. This ghost ship became a symbol of maritime tragedy, reminding people of the ruthlessness of the sea. Vanderdecken's crime was putting profit above human life. The VOC's rule of prioritizing speed over safety further fueled this madness. His curse was actually a just punishment. He was desperate to complete the voyage. He was finally sentenced to eternal wandering and never reaching the destination, and could never escape his actions. Over time, the legend has been continuously adapted. Wagner's opera portrayed Vanderdecken as a romantic figure longing for love. Pirates of the Caribbean turned the ghost ship into a supernatural being that ferries souls. These adaptations have lost their original essence. This legend is never about redemption, but about a captain due to greed and arrogance, and pushed his crew into eternal suffering. Even in modern times, sightings have not stopped. In 2011, a Cape Town fishing team saw an ancient sailboat in fog and disappeared after 3 minutes. In 2016, a tourist took a long-distance video. Was considered a ghost ship by some, while others thought it was a modern yacht. In 2022, a scientific ship detected the wreckage of a 17th-century Dutch merchant ship. When they returned to investigate 2 weeks later, the wreckage disappeared strangely. Skeptics always find explanations. Bible hallucinations, mistaken recognition, collective psychology seem to cover all the sightings. But they can't explain the undeniable consistencies and coincidences. Witnesses separated by hundreds of years, all near the Cape of Good Hope, saw the shape of the ship in the same way. All described phantom crew and eerie silence. Among the witnesses, there are royal professional naval officers, educated professionals, and ordinary people. They have no reason to lie, but they would suffer from reputation loss for reporting. What's more inexplicable is that tragedies always follow after the sightings. Sailors falling to their deaths, ships sinking mysteriously. This pattern has persisted for hundreds of years. What the truth is, no one knows. We have various theories but no hard evidence. Scientists can explain the principles of the Bible, but cannot prove that what the witnesses saw was the Bible. Historians can record shipwrecks, but cannot confirm that Vanderdecken's ship would really emerge from the sea. Psychologists can explain collective hallucinations, but cannot explain why 60 people have the same hallucinations. And this is why the Flying Dutchman is the most terrifying ghost ship in the history of navigation. It may not necessarily be a supernatural existence, but in a gray area of explainable and unexplainable, which gives people infinite speculation. In the waters near the Cape of Good Hope, maybe it was just an optical illusion, or a short-lived emergence of a sunken ship, or maybe Captain Vanderdecken really is still there. People are trying to pass through that stormy cape, which should have been sunk hundreds of years ago, still in the waves, forever. If you are lucky enough to reach that sea area, if you see an ancient sailboat with broken sails and red lights, please look away as sailors have done for 300 years.
碰的禁忌。
Some legends have their own meaning.